Good morning. Hi. We're here to talk about COVID-19 again and manganese and the surge of cases after Memorial Day. This thing is very, very contagious, obviously. And I have been following manganese as usual, as researching the studies that are on it. Manganese is the second most available metal on the planet. It comes often in flakes, and it's in three kind of electric forms, valences. The lower form you find at the bottom of the oceans. Most of the manganese is at the bottom of the ocean, and when it is in this, I think it's the, I have to get that straight. It forms a sediment. It forms actually material when it is oxidized, which doesn't have anything to do with oxygen. It has to do with losing electrons or gaining electrons. It oxidizes. Then at another level, it begins to work with oxygen and photosynthesis at one area. And then in the final level, and I believe it splits oxygen here. It definitely splits oxygen out of fluid and is a photosynthetic type response arena. And this is, so the sun's up here. So this is like the top layer. And it's contained when photosynthesis is involved, like in water, and when photosynthesis is involved, like mitochondria in the cell. Except, as far as the photosynthesis, the light that comes from a different kind of energy. And it also can turn into chemical energy as well. So it's really, it's a fascinating metal, transition metal, essential metal. It's right by iron on the periodic table. And there are ways to, I'm looking for my eraser, there it is, to understand it better. So what scientists are saying is that billions of years ago, there was what they call cyanobacteria. And I'm not an expert on this stuff, but I do follow the oxygenation pathway of how we have evolved as a very highly oxygenated, oxygen-greedy, oxygen-dependent brain, heart, and lungs. Everything else can be whatever. We can lose it, paralyze, whatever, but the brain, heart, and lungs are what keep us alive, period. They are oxygen greedy. And this is an increased oxygen level over the many, many millennium. Like this is, I think, 2.5 billion years ago, or 2.4 billion. We had the cyanobacteria that they are saying that was the first to release, oxygen. And then that moved into algae that really kind of took over later and really produced many flooded the planet with oxygen. And that's how we evolved. Enter industrialization. We'll talk about that in a minute. It's kind of flipped us back. We need to stop it. And this pandemic and quarantine is doing that very nicely. And this virus seems to be moving in on this glycolytic. It's almost like, and scientists are talking about, if we could just reverse this process that manganese is involved in, and the precursor to all of this is manganese. And then it moves up to algae because manganese splits oxygen out of water. So where there's oxygen, there's something else is going to evolve to work with that and to incorporate that into its, because that's the environment. The DNA changes according to our environment. And our DNA, people who are obese, they have their DNA has changed. People who have comorbidities and any number of, causal pathways back to how and why they're susceptible is a hypoxic type of thing. We're raising the planet of all oxygen producing forest while we are kind of infesting it. Too many of us and not enough of the trees, because it's a cycle there. It is a pure and wonderful cycle that manganese is involved. So manganese is the precursor they're looking at to cyanobacteria, and what they produced. And then, of course, I'll make the algae in green. I'll just circle the green here. So then it's the algae that really exploded in the oceans that created oxygen, and flipped the gaseous environment of the planet to an oxygenated one. Great, and here we are. Here we are, stick people, right? So that's manganese, or they're talking about manganese as the precursor to who we are. And still, as this virus comes in, manganese is a remaining mechanism used in the mitochondria to split oxygen out of water in emergency situations where the cell is starved of oxygen, like stroke and ischemia and concussions and in bruising and injuries. You'll see a ring of manganese that is kind of kicked out by the mitochondria for survival means. And if it doesn't get the oxygen, the cell tissue and tissue areas die en masse. Okay, so scientists are talking about the hopes, and some of this research was stopped, to reverse these, and the energy involved in reversing these processes so that it's back at pre-manganese. I mean, there's a lot of energy in here. And my concern is that the virus is moving in on that, is doing that reversal for us. It's a hypothesis, but so I will, and part of that hypothesis is that this isn't a sludge aqueous thing. And you got to admit that virus creates this sludge. And cyanobacteria, I don't know a whole lot about them, but I know algae just, that's all they produce is oxygen. And so they're looking at that as a fuel type and everything else. But I know that there's sludge in here. And, the virus is very, look what happens to the lungs. Be interesting to, throw fluid and manganese on those lungs and see what happens. I don't know. So we're looking at, I'm wondering if this COVID has moved in on our low oxygen environment, our glucose-rich lifestyles. And all right, there's something else I want to talk to you about in looking at manganese. And I know, there is a toxicity to it if you inhale it and such. So it's like most transition metals, too much of anything is bad. But I can tell you I've been taking 8 milligrams of manganese for at least, coming up on 2 months here every day. And I'm feeling pretty good. I'm gaining weight because I'm not using the glucose, right? I'm getting it through oxygenation and, I'm tanked up through manganese and through breathing techniques. And I hope you're watching my breathing shows. Pro-oxia, like believe in it, use it, go for it. Pro-oxia and your brain. It's good stuff. So children under the age of 10, manganese is very toxic. Go figure. So we talked about embryogenesis, try one. We do this a lot. Then manganese and iron move in to flesh out the mitochondria. So as the mitochondria come in and grow and they go into the cells, we have 1 trillion cells, maybe more, that from try 1 trillion. Let's go all the way down here where we only have 100 billion left. These are neurons. So what happens in here? Will be about age 25. That we only, and in the process, there is just hacking and sawing. It just, depending on what you're exposed to, what you do, you save some and the rest are like sliced and diced. So you lose 100 billion in the first, year. depending on what's in your environment. That includes music. And why is music important? Because music is free energy. So it takes energy to sustain a network, to build a network. And music comes in, and it's such a sensitive system that is mature at the 5-month gestational mark. We were born with a very mature, and in fact, children with autism, if they have auditory deficits at 18 months, the likelihood of them being diagnosed with autism at 3 years is skyrockets. So what's going to shape auditory deficits? Structured sound interventions, as in music. So great, that's what I do. I do that too. So you can shape the development of the brain by what's in the environment. And I do honestly believe, and I want doctors to stop iron here, stop it. Not wanted, not needed. Iron comes in the second trimester, and eventually after age 25, we really start to flesh out. We really actualize. These are just growth periods. We have spurts and this and that and talent, and we can count real fast. We can, what kids can do. They can just tell you exactly what you said 5 minutes ago. I'm like, but we realize later on that, basically who we are and what we do and believe in and how we contribute to society and our community is really what matters. And if we say something accidentally that's misinterpreted or misconstrued, that's not what matters. What matters is who we are. Whereas the kids are like a little computer. Well, so is Data on Star Trek. He's great, but he's, we want to be human. We want to stay human. We want to evolve as humans. So, but children are keeping this one and their mitochondria. And each cell has its own 100, sometimes 1,000. And they all, the ones that survive gradually have more manganese and iron. So manganese at this period is just not necessary because it's the antioxidants. It's the lower oxygen kind of spurts of this and that, or how you respond, fear. The amygdala says, this is what's going to survive. And so it's a slow, from this low oxygen environment, no iron, no manganese, gradually goes to when the brain is finished, cooked. The brain is cooked, comes out of the oven. Yay, yay. And hopefully you've had great parents and good mentoring and great schooling and comfortable home and social, good church, all those great things that help us feel good about ourselves and give us a purpose to help each other on the planet, etc. So of those 1 trillion, you only have 100 billion. Here they are, right? Pretend this is 100 billion. And it's those cells that continue to network and build on each other. And we have the visual, and we have the emotional, and we have the executive, and we have the hearing, and we have the fear. Oh boy, I'm scared. And other, hormonal and all sorts of things develop. But so that makes sense to me why it's toxic. And that makes sense to me why children under 10 are not getting this. Because their antioxidants are on full blow as they're cleaving away these 100 trillion cells. Now, if you're lucky, you keep 110 trillion billion or something. I don't know. But I remember when I was young that someone says, oh, we only use 10% of our brain. And I'm like, what kind of deal is that? And so I've always been open-minded to using more of the brain. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about. That's one thing about manganese. Now, manganese with us, I think, can be very helpful in light of this virus. And so I encourage you to try to take it. The Memorial Day experiment didn't seem to go very well. From my understanding, cases have jumped up about 18%. That's a lot. And so this virus doesn't seem to be going away too quickly. Also, there was I'm following the science of this. In the cell, in the human eukaryotic cell, we have the nucleus, which is where the DNA is stored. And around that is, I think they call the endoplasmic reticulum. And beside that is where the virus parks its little babies. And it kind of, this is called the Golgi apparatus. And it's responsible for, I think it generates proteins that go to and vesicles that that goes out of the cells. And what the virus does, and of course, you know, the mitochondria, to be honest, are kind of around the edges. I mean, they cluster depending on where they're needed. They're sometimes around here, but they're doing their stuff, getting stuff in and